Recording in progress.
Recorded.
Dave, whenever you're ready.
Okay, welcome everyone. We are honored to have Mr. Tommy Ross, performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition with us this morning. Welcome, sir. The drill for this hour is if you have questions about or for Mr. Ross, please put them in the Q&A section. I will be asking the questions based on what you put in there, so appreciate that. For everyone, welcome to day 2 of our 19th annual Acquisition Research Program Symposium. We have 744 registered participants. Press is among those. We had a great day yesterday, several panels, 15 panels, multiple speakers. Had Mr. Andrew Hunter, Air Force SAF AQ, had Mr. Berteau, Secretary Norquist, and several other distinguished acquisition personnel speaking on a variety of topics. So we're running hot into today's schedule, and so we're looking forward to hearing from you, Mr. Ross, and then we have a full slate of panels for the rest of the day today. For our participants, I encourage you to sit in on as many sessions as you can. We have coffee breaks where I'll be moderating those and have free discussion on the topics that have occurred up through then. And I encourage you to sit in on our last of 3 student poster shows where our students will talk about their thesis and topics and projects. So a great opportunity to see the cutting edge of acquisition research here at Naval Postgraduate School. So, so I'd like to go on to introduce Mr. Ross. I know you've only been in the job a week or so, but on the other hand, you've been in the Navy's front office for almost 2 years, I guess, 18 months. So, so you clearly know what's going on around the building. Mr. Ross's last job was as the Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Navy. Previously, he was a Senior Director for Policy at BSA, the Software Alliance. He wrote a groundbreaking framework for secure software. Cybersecurity is one of my interest areas, so that's really good to see. It was based on a risk-based framework, which is, I think, where we're going for sure. Prior to joining BSA, he was first Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Security Cooperation, a critically important area. He led the development of a security cooperation assessment, monitoring, and evaluation framework, and initiated and implemented the Southeast Asia Maritime Security Initiative. From 2009 to 2014, he served as Senior Intelligence and Defense Advisor to Senator Harry Reid. From 2005 to 2009, he served on the staff of Representative David Price of North Carolina. And he has served as the chairman of the board of directors for Mine Action Group America and as a senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He is a graduate of Davidson College in North Carolina and holds a master's in theology and ethics from Union Theological Seminary in New York. Might be an interesting discussion about career transitions from a young man to where you are today. So, sir, without further ado, welcome. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. Over to you, sir.
Thanks so much, Admiral Lewis. Really appreciate the welcome. Happy to talk more at some point about my transition from seminary into policy making. But as you can imagine, we go through a lot of faith-based policy making around here. So it's been been an interesting perspective to bring to the building. I'd also really like to thank your president at Naval Postgraduate School, Ann Rondeau, for hosting the event, as well as the Acquisition Research Program team for setting everything up and getting us going here today. I think it's a really important venue, brings together a lot of different perspectives from industry, academia, military, all who share an interest in getting defense acquisition research right. And I think that's really important for the Navy and certainly for the office that I have the pleasure of representing. I'm honored to kick off day 2. As you said, big day yesterday. You named a number of folks that brought their own perspectives. We could also mention Program Executive Officer for Ships, Rear Admiral Tom Anderson, who I know led a discussion on shipbuilding trends, and representative from our office on the Unmanned Task Force, Paul Mann, who led a panel about adapting unmanned technologies to naval requirements. So it sounds like an interesting day. I would have loved to have spent the day with you. And again, you're set up for a really interesting day today as well. Today, you'll hear about the Navy acquisition workforce from our Director of Acquisition Talent Management, Ms. Marianne Lyons. Our Program Executive Officer for Command, Control, Communications, Computers, and Intelligence, Rear Admiral Kurt Rothenhaus, will lead a panel about cybersecurity from an acquisition standpoint, which Admiral Lewis, as you know well, is a critical topic facing us with a lot of challenges. So I think you've got a great set of panels before you today with those speakers, among others. Before we get started, I wanted to sort of set the table for the discussions that you'll be having the rest of the day, with a little perspective about where we are in the Navy broadly and in the RDA community more specifically. Last October, Secretary Del Toro, when I was working for him as his chief of staff, developed and released strategic guidance to the Department of the Navy. He outlined 3 enduring priorities, and if you listen to Secretary Del Toro speak, you will hear him mention these priorities in almost every speech he gives. They are the guiding principles organizing our work in the Department of the Navy. And each one of them has a really important role for acquisition. The first of those is maintaining maritime dominance in defense of our nation. That's about building a Navy and Marine Corps team that can address our pacing challenge and acute threats to our nation. As an acquisition community, our charge is to maintain in our acquisition system the agility, efficiency, and urgency that we need to meet that challenge. I think we will not succeed in matching and meeting our pacing challenge without an acquisition community that can deliver the capabilities and capacity we need on a timely and affordable basis. Second priority in Secretary Del Toro's strategic guidance is empowering our people. That's about building, organizing, and empowering civilian and uniformed acquisition talent to carry out the mission of maintaining our maritime dominance and the other missions that our Navy performs. It also means we must ensure a healthy, rewarding work environment where everyone is treated with dignity, with respect, and also with gratitude for the challenging work that we're asking of you. Third priority for Secretary Del Toro is strengthening strategic partnerships. That's about fostering relationships with industry and academia, as well as our many programs with allies and partner navies. Those partnerships with industry and academia is exactly what you're doing here today. And of course, what we spend an enormous amount of our time in the acquisition community fostering. Without them, we will not succeed. This January, building on the Secretary's strategic guidance, the CNO announced his Get Real, Get Better campaign to address the acute and pacing threats by empowering our leaders to accurately evaluate ourselves and our work, and to make exceptional the norm throughout our ranks. We just can't afford not to do that, given the competition we face from Russia and China. That means our acquisition professionals at all levels must constantly self-assess their teams. Where do we have obstacles? Where do we have barriers that we need to overcome? Where can we do better? They must close gaps in performance and apply more technical rigor throughout the acquisition lifecycle of their programs. My point here is that when senior leaders launch initiatives like this, they're speaking as much to acquisition professionals like you as to any other naval professionals. And so it's critical to apply this guidance to your research here. There's a few acquisition specific areas I'd like to cover, and then I want to spend the rest of the time hearing from you and speaking to your questions to the best of my ability based on my 7 days on the job. First, I'm proud that we have recently taken a step in modernizing Navy acquisition policy guidance via a new Secretary of the Navy instruction, SecNav Instruction 5000.2G. It was released just last month. In my previous job as Chief of Staff, I had the pleasure of reading and editing all 180 pages of it and preparing it for the Secretary. So that was kind of my indoctrination into the acquisition world. But it's a really important step forward in a lot of different areas. And I think we're really excited to have that policy come out. It provides a single Department of Navy acquisition policy to support flexible approaches to develop, procure, protect, and sustain our Navy and Marine Corps. It updates, the updates it contains to the adaptive acquisition framework includes tools that accelerate development of promising technologies and help them evade the valley of death. These tools help us address urgent operational needs, middle tier of acquisition, major capability acquisition, software acquisition pathways, defense business systems, and the defense acquisition of services. The new instruction also details critical updates to the 2-pass 7-gate process, systems engineering, test and evaluation, cybersecurity, data, and sustainment. I can tell you I'm particularly excited about the updates it makes in the area of sustainment, which has to be a much more significant priority for the Navy if we're going to be able to field an effective, sustainable warfighting force. And the new instruction really does lay out, in addition to Gate 7 reviews, a number of different innovations about how we approach sustainment as a department. All these updates across the different areas I mentioned are designed to streamline guidance for our acquisition professionals and give them tools so that you can do your jobs. I'm sure all of you have read that, have it on your nightstands, have it dog-eared, you've gone through it multiple times. But if you haven't, it's available online. I'd encourage you to take a look. I think it's really important that you become familiar with it and allow it to guide your research. Let me also talk a little bit more about the adaptive acquisition framework I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's really central to that SecNav instruction. The AAF, the Adaptive Acquisition Framework, uses advanced acquisition methods to help acquisition professionals benefit from commercial modernization processes and pathways. It promotes collaboration with industry and other organizations to implement modern tools and data analytics. AAF pathways are streamlined and simplified to focus your attention on specific program needs without sacrificing rigor and discipline. If we can implement the AAF successfully, it will give you the flexibility and latitude to develop programs for the warfighter much more efficiently. Navy programs are already adapting to the AAF processes. We're using it to expand forward presence and warfighting readiness. We're using it to innovate and modernize. We're using it to leverage naval education and programs like this one at NPS as critical warfighting enablers. We're using it to cultivate talent and teamwork from non-traditional sources. We're using it to modernize business systems to enhance performance and affordability. And we are using it to strengthen relationships within the Secretariat, OpNav, and HQ Marine Corps, as well as with industry, academia, and international partners. Our adaptive acquisition framework and other recent policy innovations, however, are worthless unless we have a skilled community of professionals to implement them. Let me take a moment to talk a little bit more about what we're doing to recruit, develop, and retain a more agile, digital savvy acquisition workforce that can carry these policy innovations and carry Navy acquisition into the future. A key way we are modernizing training and certification is through the Back to Basics initiative. Back to Basics renews focus on core acquisition functional areas where most positions directly support the Assistant Secretary for Research, Development, and Acquisition recognized acquisition programs. It ensures our acquisition workforce meets timely and relevant experience, training, and certification requirements to fill those positions. Under Back to Basics, the supervisor and employee work closely together on tailored training specific to the needs of the job. The Navy is also focusing on a digital savvy workforce through initiatives such as the Data Science Training Program and by sponsoring industry rotations with IT-centric businesses. For example, we just sent 3 hard chargers on a rotation with Amazon Web Services. We are also refreshing our acquisition workforce pipeline through the Naval Acquisition Development Program and using retention tools such as the Acquisition Workforce Tuition Assistance Program and student loan repayment. Finally, I want to emphasize that a strong acquisition workforce must be a diverse acquisition workforce. We simply will not meet the needs of a 21st century acquisition workforce unless we are able to effectively recruit talented individuals from different communities and talent pools all across this nation. Moreover, a diverse workforce brings diverse perspectives to common challenges, improving our ability to innovate and problem solve. I'm just starting out in this position, as I mentioned, but I can tell you that strengthening the diversity of our workforce is going to be a significant priority for me. Before I shift to your questions, which I am very eager to get to, I do want to offer a few acquisition research areas for your consideration. These are the areas where the department is really focusing on R&D, research, development, and evaluation now. Your research is also critical and ultimately helps the Navy and Marine Corps maintain maritime dominance. First area I would offer for your consideration is long-range fires. The Navy and Marine Corps need to be able to reach out and deter our adversaries across vast oceans. Developing new long-range fires weapons requires more advanced sensors, improved position navigation, and more robust communications networks. Second area is counter C5ISRT. Counter C5ISRT includes restricting, deterring, and limiting our adversaries' ability to conduct C5ISRT against us. The department continues to aggressively pursue counter C5ISRT, command and control, communications, computers, cyber, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting capabilities in order to fulfill our national responsibilities and naval missions. The next area I'd offer for your consideration is terminal defense. A concerted enterprise level of effort is underway to identify the most lethal and sustainable combination of kinetic and non-kinetic efforts to improve integrated deterrence and integrated defensive capabilities and offensive fires capacity to fight and win at sea. Contested logistics is another really important area. Our naval forces must increasingly operate in a more distributed manner and often within contested locations around the world. We're focusing our R&D community on improving organic sustainment capabilities and more efficient delivery mechanisms. I'd also suggest, as I said earlier, what goes hand in hand with contested logistics is a more efficient and effective sustainment architecture. And I know, Admiral Lewis and I have talked about some topics in this area, and actually both of these areas with contested logistics and sustainment things like conditions-based maintenance, trying to understand how we will logistically support a fleet of unmanned surface and subsurface ships, how we can use unmanned surface and subsurface ships to support our logistics in contested environments. A number of very rich questions there. I think from a sustainment standpoint, we are seeing costs rise at a far faster pace than inflation, and really eat into our ability to carry out the acquisition programs we need to do to be able to support our ability to address that pacing challenge. So again, for me, a really important area. If those aren't enough, there's Project Overmatch, there's unmanned, well, we talked a little bit about unmanned systems, but there's, beyond the logistics, an array of topics there. There's artificial intelligence, there's live, virtual, and constructive training. The list goes on. You've got plenty to work with. I want to thank you for letting me. This is actually my first speech in this new job, so thank you for being my guinea pigs and let me get my feet under me here. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in what I think is a really valuable symposium, and to kick off day 2. Your work here is really important to the acquisition community and to the Navy and Marine Corps as a whole. So I definitely encourage you to make the most of your time here and take advantage of the really rich discussions you'll be able to participate in. With that, I look forward to your questions. I am not going to promise that I'm going to answer all of them, but if it's anything having to do with the last 7 days, I'm your guy.
Well, thank you, sir. That was excellent. That's a great run through of the leadership priorities, and I really like your proposals on research areas. I will say that I know for a fact we are working in all of those areas, and for long range fires, we just had a student project that looked at what Navy ships could potentially carry an Army hypersonic missile system. That was published a few months ago, and it did a detailed system engineering analysis of flight deck space and ramps and below deck storage and turn radius, and a really superb piece of work that identified several ships that were potential. Contested logistics, we've done a tremendous amount of work. We have a thing we've been doing here for a few years called a warfare innovation workshops or warfare innovation continuums, and we've done 2 exercises on contested logistics, working closely with OPNAV N4. So I'll go ahead and share those with you. I think there is lots of work to do in that further, so there's plenty of opportunity there. Also, we recently had a Marine Corps student who came to us, his dance card filled out by the Marine Corps, said, I want you to do additive manufacturing on a hill in Afghanistan. And his thesis was how to do that. And then he went back to completed his thesis, went back to the Marine Corps. They put him in charge of doing that. And last summer he did it. So flash to bang, 4 years from glint in the eye of a Marine Corps general to completed additive manufacturing system in a tent. Not in Afghanistan, it's in down in Paris Island, but it works, and it's good. We also recently received a congressional plus up for additive manufacturing to support our work with in that area. So we're very enthused about that. So I would say we are working in those areas, and we look forward to expanding that work in support of you and in support of the acquisition workforce and the acquisition process in the Navy writ large. So we are your acquisition research activity, as I've said before. So we're raring to go, and have actually, we have 50 or 60 students, 55 students reporting next month, and they're looking for topics. So this is perfect for those students. Yeah. So we have, as Admiral Rondeau likes to say, we have 2,500 students here, which he calls warrior scholars. They were all in cockpits and control rooms and bridges and mocks and jocks 3 months ago, and they are they are eager to innovate and discover new knowledge in their areas of expertise. So we're here to enable that. I do have a question, first question from Adam Pollack. He wants to talk, he's asking about the requirements management process and a professionalization of the requirements management workforce. So I'll read his questions. DoD has done significant work to modernize both the defense acquisition system via the creation of the Agile acquisition framework, as you mentioned, and acquisition community training, as you mentioned, with back to basics. Missing from the modernization efforts is an update of the requirements management process and professionalization of a requirements management workforce. What are DoD and DON doing to update this critical function? Over.
Thanks for the question. So as you know, first of all, I'll say I think it's an absolutely a really important question, and absolutely right. I think definitely a need there to generate and validate requirements more effectively than we've been able to do, and to control the scope of those requirements. From my perspective, I think we have obviously, a broader DoD architecture that we plug into, and then a lot of work within the Navy and the Marine Corps, OPNAV and HQMC on requirements. I've had less exposure to it in the RDA world, and so I honestly don't have a lot of insight into activities underway in those three spaces to address requirements. What I can tell you from a broader sort of secretariat standpoint, sort of from when I was working as chief of staff for the secretary, I think we have felt like the process within the Department of the Navy is challenging because the services have been able to develop requirements and build programs around those requirements, and the Secretariat, RDA and beyond, have little ability to independently understand, evaluate, and make sense of those requirements. It's kind of, we take on faith that they've been worked out, and as the Navy and the Marine Corps argue they have been. And so what we've been looking at is building in, I think, some additional analytic capability. And there used to be something in the Secretariat called the Office of Program Appraisal several years ago that I think Secretary Del Toro had some experience with. They had different missions over the years, or their mission kind of evolved over the years. But I think what has been attractive to Secretary Del Toro and to me as well has been regenerating some sort of analytic function resident in the Secretariat that allows for that kind of independent look at requirements from the Navy and Marine Corps, and allows us to enter into the dialogue in a more informed way on requirements, on force design, on evaluating Navy and Marine Corps program submissions, et cetera. And so we're in the process of looking at kind of how we can set that up and what it would look like. So I expect there will be more to follow pretty soon. But that's kind of where we are from a Navy Secretariat standpoint. Sorry, I don't have more complete information about what's going on in the services and in DoD more broadly.
No, that's good. Paul Mann, yesterday, Paul Mann had a very robust discussion, as you mentioned, on uncrewed vehicles. I like that terminology better. And one thing we talked about at length was portfolio management in the acquisition community. Yeah, this isn't a question, but UAV or UXVs right for that kind of approach. There was a recent GAO report on that, and the author of that report was in the panel yesterday. And I would say we had a very robust and productive discussion about introducing portfolio management within the acquisition community, which actually would help address some of the requirements issues, because we do manage program by program, as you mentioned, and the UAV community is, or UXV community tends to be more cross-discipline, if you will. So Paul's all fired up about that, so it'll be excellent for later. So I have another question from Gregory Sanders. This is directly in your Wayback Machine, in your wheelhouse. In keeping with the priority to strengthen partnerships, what do you see as promising places for greater Navy cooperation on development or procurement with our international partners and allies? So.
That's a great question. It does go back to my previous work. I think this is an area where the Navy has a lot of opportunity to improve. I mean, the Marine Corps as well, but I think in the Navy, the Navy does not have a terribly large or diverse set of offerings, through foreign military sales for partners. It's hard to sell ships to foreign partners. I understand that. We do okay at it, but part of it is, our ships are so expensive and so much more large and complex than most partner navies want or need. So I've always been fascinated with the idea of looking at some ships at a smaller class ships, Corvette sized ships, for example, that many there's a pretty significant market for. Most of our allies and partners have Corvettes in their navies, and those are the right size ships for them to be able to operate and sustain. And so, I've thought about that for a long time. I think let's take that and think about what Corvette class ships might be able to offer in support of distributed maritime operations. And I think the distributed piece is something that we seem to sometimes be challenged by, and bringing that vision to life. I think some ships that can hide in littorals and can carry some VLS tubes, or can carry out sea mining and that kind of thing, could certainly and could operate in a distributed manner, could be really interesting. What makes it more interesting is sort of adding that conversation on to where you're just talking about, Admiral Lewis. I think in general, in the unmanned world, there is a lot of opportunity for partnering with allies and partners. I think allies and partners have systems that should be of interest to us, and have technologies that we could work with them on incorporating into the unmanned space. But I think particularly thinking about surface ships around that Corvette size that are unmanned or optionally manned, again, for me, is really interesting. But I do acquisition, research and development. I don't do force design and strategy. So take those thoughts with a grain of salt. I think there are a number of opportunities out there. I think the AUKUS agreement that we have with Australia and the UK offers up a tremendous number of opportunities outside of submarines. Thinking about cyber capabilities, thinking about unmanned. I think one area that has been of interest for cooperation with partners and allies in the Indo-Pacific for several years now, but is relatively unexplored, except in a few instances, is integrated air and missile defense. So I absolutely think that's an area that we should be looking at. That's a few. Let me stop there. I could go on, but that's a few that I think are particularly interesting.
Dave, you're on mute.
That's a good point, sir. You're exactly on. When I was PO ships, I had the ships FMS programs, and American platforms are very popular overseas. But you're right; they tend to be expensive, and a tendency was to go for smaller ships, more in line with the navies that were receiving them. So that's fruitful. Next, I have an actually very insightful question from Hal Hickman. I understand that you've only been in your position for a week. Has anything surprised you or excited you in the first week? Over.
Yes. There have been a number of things that have surprised and excited me. I mean, I think to start out with the excitement, this is a really great team in RD&A and the broader acquisition community, and I'm really lucky to be a part of it. So I'm just excited to be, surrounded by people who are real professionals and really understand what the Navy needs and are incredibly dedicated to delivering. I'm also excited. I mean, I will talk about my interest in sustainment as much as you'll let me, but I think, there's a lot going on in this area that has a tremendous amount of potential that I think, we have some work to do to deliver on that potential, but I've been excited to see the seeds that have been planted. Really interesting work going on, for example, around corrosion control, which is a neglected but really significant driver of our rising sustainment costs, and our the amount of time our ship's crews spend on maintenance instead of on warfighting, which I think is something we need to pay attention to. That's one example, but there really is a lot of good stuff going on, so I've been excited about that. I think what has surprised me, a few things, the scope of activities in this arena is just incredible. I don't think that I will ever learn enough about everything that we have going on, no matter how long I stay here. I think beyond that, I don't know if there's necessarily any one thing that has surprised me, other than, I've had several conversations in the first few days about how we approach acquisition in relationship to maintaining industrial base capacity and capabilities. And I think I have been surprised by the way that that those considerations sometimes seem to be the tail wagging the dog. I think we have some challenges to get the right balance on making sure that we are getting what we need for our warfighters versus sustaining production lines, but we really depend on our industrial base, so it has to be a balance. And I think I've been surprised by the complexity of those discussions and the need, I think, for some new approaches to strike that balance better.
It's excellent. I don't know if you've read 6 Frigates yet, but I recommend that you do. That's the story of the building of Constitution and the first frigates for the U.S. Navy. You will recognize all of the issues in that book. So that's one I do keep on my my bedstand and consult regularly. It's full of insights. Another question, a little more controversial here, but I think relevant to our discussion. Mr. Michael Brown is announced his departure from the head as the head of the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU. out here in San Jose, and he states that he is frustrated that we're not supported more by the big Pentagon. That's his quote. The Navy has a Naval IX program, which has recently been restructured, and Naval Postgraduate School has a tech bridge, one of 17 tech bridges in your purview, which is also intended to be an outreach to industry. I certainly perceive TechBridge as a successful, innovative, and forward-leading program. Any comments on your comments based on what you've seen in the last week and what you've seen in the last couple of years in terms of our Navy's relationship with commercial industry and in bringing in, new ideas and new technologies out of the commercial world into the maritime domain? Over.
Yeah, I can give you an opinion, and it's not an informed opinion. So take it with a grain of salt, because I've got a lot of learning to do to understand the incentives around different industry sectors working with the department. But I think that my impression, based on my experience, in the last 7 days, but throughout my career, is certainly that we do not have it right. We have not figured out how to work with the most innovative companies outside of the defense industrial base. I think we've got work to do there. How to fix it is where I need to do a lot more homework. My impression, though, is that organizations like Defense Innovation Unit are really important for helping us identify where innovation is and building relationships with innovative businesses. But I think at some point, innovative businesses are not going to want to work with DoD until there are broader changes to how DoD does business. We have a lot of bureaucracy around our contracting processes and so on that make it, a hard proposition for companies to work with DoD, particularly where there's not necessarily a lot of money involved in comparison to their other, the rest of their customer base. And so I think there's some of those fundamental challenges that we really do at some point need to address if we're going to find ways to pull in innovative businesses. And I think, we have opportunities to do that with, other transactional authorities and that kind of thing. And I think there is a lot of work going on to get us there. So this is not, in any way a criticism, because I think everybody kind of recognizes this is a challenge and we're working to solve it. But there is work to be done to meet in the middle somewhere.
Yes, sir. Kind of a follow-on to that. Yesterday, Mr. Hunter talked about digital acquisition engineering and Navy acquisition community has been talking a lot about data modernization and using digital data in the acquisition process as well as the design and engineering process. Can you discuss either of those? I'm reaching back to your cyber experience. Discuss either of those within the context of digital acquisition and digital engineering in support of acquisition. Over.
Yeah, I think we're really trying to be forward-leaning in that space. I think one of the areas of emphasis here in the RDA organization is on a digital architecture for modeling and simulation that can really serve the full enterprise, that can link together, that can provide digital modeling services for research and development organizations individually, but also link up those different organizations so that we can take a network or an enterprise approach to capturing data and making sense of that data. I think there's a lot of promise there. I think, in terms of digital acquisition, I'll just say from from a software standpoint, we're very much trying to drive this organization toward embracing Agile. And we talk about Agile and DevOps kind of approaches, but for me, as you can imagine, I think DevSecOps, integrating security into the Agile and DevOps kind of processes is really important. But that kind of those modern software development approaches are really important. We're building out Department of Navy development environments, and I think that different contractors and so on can take advantage of to work in environments that are already tooled to be able to build in the security measures, but also the quality control measures and the common libraries and that kind of thing that we need to get better and more agile in software development. But we have a lot of work to do. That is a significant culture change. And I think, one of my jobs is going to be an evangelist for adopting that culture, because I think it is absolutely critical that we move in that direction. It gives us a lot of warfighting advantages to be that agile. The ability to continuously develop new applications, to develop security patches, to develop new features, and to push those things out into the fleet, with the press of a button, rather than having to wait 5 years for a ship to come in for an availability to get a IT update. I mean, that is game changing. So we've got to get there.
Sure, that's good. Yeah, there are several pockets of excellence in the Navy. I'm thinking of the software factories that POIWS has, and then, as you mentioned, Kurt Rothenhaus, Admiral Rothenhaus out in POC4I has been doing a lot of innovative work in that area. So I think we have several exemplars of exactly what you're talking about active
Absolutely.
in the Navy. We had VCNO Admiral Lesher out here at the school last week, and he talked at length about Get Better. Very insightful, informative discussion. I think we had most of the faculty and most of the students in person, and then the rest picked it up virtually. Do you have any insights or any thoughts on bringing that process into the acquisition process as ASN RDA? I know you're familiar with it from your prior assignment at Chief of Staff. Any immediate thoughts on implementing that in the acquisition side of the Navy? Over.
At a high level, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to take some thought to understand how we can best apply the Get Better methodology to the acquisition community. But I think it's really important that we do. I think a lot of it comes down to is leadership at whatever level you are in the organization, being honest about where there are problems and taking action to address those problems. We've seen some challenges where problems have been identified, they've been known, and they've been allowed to just sort of linger out there, and then they've come back to bite us. And I think we can't afford that in any part of the department. What I think the challenge is often that people who, at different levels in the organization who are able to identify challenges may not necessarily have the resources or authorities to address them at their level. And so we've got to find ways for those challenges to get brought to the attention of people who can help with those resources and authorities, and make sure that they are then addressed and not allowed again to sort of linger. So how we apply that within the acquisition community, I think we've got to give some thought to, but it begins, I think, with honest feedback, and I would certainly invite that kind of feedback. Would welcome it personally. Where there are barriers that we need to overcome, where there are problems that we need to solve, I would much rather know about them and be tasked with the problem of figuring out how to solve them than to not know about them. So certainly feedback welcome.
Dave, you're on mute.
Last question. I know you have to leave a little bit early to set up for another discussion. Congress mandated a commission on budgeting reform, PPBE reform. I'm curious if you've had any interaction with them recently, and what your thoughts might be on that commission, and where they might go or where they should go. Over.
I've not had any interaction with them. They're just getting stood up. I think they maybe just hired a staff director and, getting the commissioners in place. And so, they're just getting going, but certainly a really important effort, I think. And I hope that it will look at kind of both sides of the equation, the PPBE process within the Pentagon, but also the impacts of Congress's approach to budgeting, the interactions between Congress's approach to budgeting and our own. I think, within the Navy, we have a lot of work to do, even outside of the commission. When I arrived here as chief of staff, I was pretty surprised to learn that we did not have a PPBE process written down anywhere. It was ad hoc, year to year. At least, in the Secretariat, I think the processes are much more defined within the services. But from an enterprise standpoint, a whole of DON standpoint, there was no such process in place. So there's now a PPBE instruction that lays out what that process should look like. The challenge with instructions is always implementing them. And I think that's where we are right now, is going through the process of putting in place, a PPBE cycle that is predictable, repeatable, and effective. And effective, means making sure that the process is transparent enough so that there are not surprises, and so that leaders across the DON buy into the outcomes. And I think effective also means preserving decision space so that we can make smart choices about allocating limited resources against our strategic priorities. That has actually been a real challenge, that preserving decision space piece. And that, within the Navy, that's a microcosm of the department as a whole. Timelines, and this goes back to the discussion around Congress's role, because we're always waiting on something, whether it's, the appropriations from Congress, the top line from ONB, the guidance from whoever, we're always waiting on something, and timelines are always getting pushed back, and that really closes in on decision space. And so, that's really a point of emphasis here in the Navy, but I think is something, preserving that decision space is something that we need to look at more broadly. I think, there's a lot to do in terms of, thinking about the methodologies we use, building in, better use of data analytics and that kind of thing. But I think there's also a lot to be said about sort of rethinking our planning timelines and trying to build in some more, some more predictability. I think is important across the board, but particularly from an RDA perspective, when we think about the impact that a lack of predictability and inconsistency from one budget cycle to the next has on the shipbuilding industry and on this, the sustainment industrial base. I think that's really damaging for us. So those are a few things I really hope we will look at.
Yes, sir. Yesterday we had two discussions related to that. David Berteau, president of PSC, talked about, you look at obligation rates on years with CRs, or the years with long CRs and years with short CRs. That first quarter obligation was always suffering a little bit. And then later we had a student thesis that looked at the impact of continuing resolutions on the Navy's ability to actually spend money within the timelines for, OMIN money or RDT&E and turning into expired funds or canceling funds. And they found that there was a correlation. The longer the CR, the harder it was to spend money. Not surprised, but it turns out it's statistically true. So it's a research-based conclusion that that CRs end up producing more expired and canceling funds down the road, which is loss of use of money. So that was nice, insightful research. Well, sir, our time is over. I thank you very much for accepting our invitation to speak with 7 days in the job. That's wonderful of you. Thank you for that. And I wish you well and look forward to working with you and obviously the entire ASN RDA staff in the weeks and months to come. This is an important time in the Navy. It's critical work, and certainly we at the Naval Postgraduate School and within the Acquisition Research Program really want to be in the fight with you and helpful in bringing you the research results and the new knowledge that we find to support you in your job in the Navy and in meeting our mission. So again, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I hope the rest of day 2 goes much better than my presentation. I hope you have a great day, and look forward to working with you all.
Sir, you set a high bar. We'll reach for it. Thank you very much, sir. Take care.
In progress.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the second day of the 19th Annual Acquisition Research Symposium. We had a fantastic day yesterday, and we just heard from Mr. Thomas Ross, who is performing the duties of ASN RDA with a fantastic introductory keynote speech. And we're continuing with our second plenary session. And when we thought about our symposium this year, one of our one of the top priorities was to focus on the workforce. And we war gamed. How would we do that? And we all felt that we should try to bring together what we think are the centers of gravity for the acquisition workforce. And what better way to do that than to bring together the Navy DATM and the Air Force and the Army and the Fourth Estate DACMs to talk about their initiatives within the acquisition workforce, especially in light of all the transformation that has taken place. Obviously, we've had a complete rewrite of the 5000 series with the adaptive acquisition framework. We have now the initiative Back to Basics, and those two things alone are tremendous transformation and affect our workforce across the spectrum. And so this is what this plenary session is about. The second thing we had to think about is who should chair this distinguished panel. And we needed someone a lot more charismatic than me. We needed a leader. And so when I need a leader, I always go to my Ranger buddy, and that's Mike Sloan. Mike and I grew up in the acquisition world together. We were assistant product managers together, program managers together. And then Mike went on to be the chief of staff of ASALT. He was the assistant PEO for enterprise information systems. He was then the PEO for simulation training and instrumentation, and the PEO for intelligence and electronic warfare and sensors. So a tremendous level of acquisition experience Mike brought to the table. After he retired from the Army after 29 years of service, he continued to serve our nation as the deputy director for a little operation called Warp Speed, continuing to serve our nation. And then finally, Mike is now the dean at the Defense University, the Defense Acquisition University's Defense Systems Management College. And so I'm going to turn it over to my good friend and Ranger buddy, Dean Sloan.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dr. Mortlock, for your introduction and just and also your continued service to our nation, right? In this case, through academia and helping others become the most that they can be for our nation. Up front, I'd also like to thank NPS's Ms. Greer and of course, Michelle Johnson for their support in preparing us for this. And on the Defense Acquisition University side, I'd like to thank, of course, Ms. Newhouse. After 37 spins of charts and getting us ready, etc. It's been incredible. And of course, my support here at Fort Belvoir, Ms. Volz. Just tremendous support to the plenary session. I really do appreciate it. So to the greater audience, good morning to each and every one of you as you join us for this panel today. And I think what you're going to find is it's the session that's titled Acquisition Workforce, Insights from the Service Directors, Acquisition Career Management, as Dr. Mortlock said. The panel is going to discuss and present through slides. I wanted to make sure, right, and much to sometimes the DACMs and DATMs, we arm wrestled and somehow I beat all four of them at once and convinced them that the slides are going to be worth it, because when you see, the audience sees what they're presenting, it's going to reinforce what they're saying. So I really appreciate you pulling these slides together. It's different from just a discussion panel, but I think it'll help resonate and sink in some of those thoughts that you're going to share, because it is going to get pretty complex in a hurry. So they're going to talk about some of the service acquisition initiatives which support development, training, education of the acquisition professionals across the Department of Defense. They'll also address opportunities to coordinate and synchronize efforts amongst the service DACMs and DATM. You'll see that today, how there are a lot of similarities and a lot of things that they can share with each other. Our focus is going to be on strategic talent management, right? And so if you ever want to make something important, you say it twice: strategic talent management. Specifically, we're going to discuss education, training, experience for the defense acquisition workforce now and into the future. Before we get into that discussion, we'll have a back to basics overview to kind of level set everyone out here, the audience, us, on DAU's perspective of back to basics. And it's not our focus area today, but I do think that we need to see that and then leverage this time to provide a quick update before getting into service unique strategic talent management, like I talked about. So I'll also say, please note that the training provided by DAU is broader than the defense acquisition workforce. You're like, what? Broader than us? How can that be? Well, it is. So DAU by law has some responsibilities. And so you're going to see some of that teased out today and how that plays into what we do in training the acquisition workforce. We also support the international and requirements communities. DAU international training is what's called a knowledge area, and it's divided into two sub areas: specialist training and generalist training. The requirements management certification training, RMCT as it's known, is agreed upon joint standard managed by DAU here, the Pentagon J8, and the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. And you'll see how all of those play into what we as acquisition professionals have to do. So now I'm going to introduce you to our incredible speakers for today. You'll see on the slide there, I think it's, you'll see here in a moment. So Chris Robinson, Mr. Chris Robinson, he's the Associate Dean for Outreach and Mission Assistance on the left side of the screen there. Outreach and Mission Assistance. So there's this term called ADOMA. When I came on the campus, even though I've been around DAU a long time, everyone's like, that's the ADOMA, that's the ADOMA. It's like, the what? So just so you know, this is important. Outreach and Mission Assistance, right? We at DAU want to be there to help you when you have workshops, when you have training needs, whatever you need, reach out to us, because we actually have assistant deans that do that. So associate deans that help bring all that together. So Chris is from the Capital Northeast region here at DAU. Moving to the right, is Mr. Ronald, we call him Rob Richardson. He's the director of the U.S. Army Acquisition Support Center here at Fort Belvoir and director Acquisition Career Management, as the DACM is the title. In that role, he oversees the 30,000 strong Army acquisition workforce and supports the Army's 12 PEOs in areas of human resources, resource management, program structure, acquisition information management, and program protection. And Rob brings 30 years of acquisition experience in both public and private sector, and he brings a unique perspective and insights for talent and change management. So he has a great discussion, great points to make today. Moving to the right, you'll see Mr. David, AKA Sammy Slade. All the great Air Force folks have to have a really cool name, right? So Sammy Slade is the Air Force Director, Acquisition Career Management, the DACM there. He's responsible for integrated management of the Air Force's 44,000 plus members of the acquisition workforce across all functional areas. So Sammy provides acquisition, human resources policy, and strategic planning while managing the training and development of civilian and military acquisition personnel Air Force wide. What you're hearing here is a slight difference in duty titles, but also what they're responsible for. So each service is different. And that's what's going to be interesting today when you hear about how they're presenting and laying out the talent management and development. You'll see each service approaches this differently, which is great because you'll get to learn how the other services are doing things and maybe even learn a little bit more about your service. All right, moving to the right, we see Miss Marianne Lyons there. Big smile on her face, happy as can be. Appreciate that, Marianne. She is the U.S. Navy Director, Acquisition Talent Management. In this case, she's the DATM. She leads the professional development and management of the Department of the Navy's over 71,000 member civilian and military acquisition workforce. Ms. Lyons serves as the Chief Advisor to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition in all matters relating to initiatives and other efforts that improve the acquisition workforce through education, training, and career development. Moving to the right from there, you see Mr. Otis Lincoln. Otis is the Fourth Estate Director, Acquisition Career Management. So he is also a DACM. He serves as a chief advisor to more than 30 Department of Defense agencies. 30 Department of Defense agencies. And wait till you see this chart, right? When you see what these agencies are and how huge they are, it's mind-boggling. But also for field activities, assisting with the career development, statutory training, and continuous learning for more than 28,000 acquisition workforce professionals. His office provides tools and resources to enable component acquisition executives to anticipate workforce needs. So if we could go to the next chart, please, Michelle. What I'd like to do is just quickly show the audience agenda. I'm not going to read this to you. You'll see it's a packed agenda. When we get to the Q&A session, I've got some questions I'm going to ask the different folks sitting on the panel, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes on the back end and we'll watch for any questions coming in from the audience. So with that said, Mr. Robinson, Chris, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Mike, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and kind of try to tee things up here for the symposium. I think the main event is, getting the perspective from our DACM leadership. But I'll try to tee things up and give everybody good context about back to basics and some of the big changes going on at DAU to support this new learning environment. Next slide, please. So I guess, the first question is, what was wrong with the old framework? Why new? Why change? Why is DAU changing? And I think, many of us realize that we are in a very new strategic environment than we even were a few years ago. Peer competitors, great power competition, accelerating technological change. When you think about AI, hypersonics, the importance of data, and all those things that are challenging our acquisition workforce today. We really need a workforce that can be more adaptable, deliver capabilities faster, more affordably. And that takes a learning and development environment to match, right? We all have to do better, move faster, even on the learning and development side, be more adaptable. So a few years ago, as back to basics, the idea for it was being refined between OSD and the services. DAU set off on its own transformation, which from a strategic level, you can think of, we want to move from and are moving from the old kind of schoolhouse model, right, of learning and development to being a modern learning platform. And what that means is, our job is really to connect the workforce with the learning and skills they need to do their jobs, and using all the tools in the toolbox to do that. That includes making our courses more flexible and easily accessible, more online and virtual content. We'll talk a little bit more about specialty credentials in a bit, and that's going to be a big component of the DAU platform and what we offer to the workforce going forward. But also, that it's a platform. So we're connecting the workforce, not just with DAU content in our own providers, but with other learning providers, and helping make that frictionless connection between workforce members and sources of learning like Coursera, the massively open online courseware provider, where we can provide that connection to workforce members and world-class contents from the best universities out there. So a key part of this is, DAU's own transformation. And you can go to the next slide, please. And so I think what you're going to hear from the panel members is kind of, the key tenets captured on this slide. But when I think of DAWIA modernization, AKA back to basics, and our own transformation at DAU, there's three things that come to mind. One is that certification is just the start, right? It's been leaned out and optimized, in order to get to that second key component of it is empowerment of the workforce, giving the workforce, their organizations, supervisors more power, more leeway, more flexibility in orchestrating their own learning based on the job they have at hand and based on where folks want to go to, what they aspire to in their careers. And that takes me to the kind of third tenet, right? To do that, we really need a culture of lifelong learning, and that's key for this whole thing to work well. That lifelong learning mentality, continuing to learn everything as you go through your career, is a shift from maybe the way many of us thought about acquisition learning and development in the past, where we had the 3 levels of certification in the old DAWIA framework, kind of front loaded. When you were done with DAU, especially, maybe you didn't think about DAU down the line, but going forward, we want to support an environment from the DAU perspective, especially that fosters that lifelong learning mentality. Okay. Next slide, please. And so a little bit, by the numbers, what's changing with DAWIA modernization and back to basics. We're going from 14 career fields down to 6 functional areas. And I think there might be a 7th functional area added on there, auditing, but very streamlined in terms of, the different functional buckets that we're packaging certification training into. And over there in the upper right, a lot less certification training that folks have to go to, that mandatory training. And you can see there, the reduction in training hours to get to the highest level of certification in those career fields. And a good example is contracting. They'll have 1 level of certification, 73% reduction over what a contracting workforce member would have to go to get certified at level 3 in the past. So, like I mentioned before, that really drives home the point that, certification is really just a start to give the foundation, to go on to bigger and better things. And that's going to be vital going forward. And the last, the bottom of the slide, again, hits on that reduced core certification is really there as a foundation to provide more flexibility to get that job relevant training, pull in the learning you need when you need it. And a shift in focus to that lifelong learning culture. So really, this is all about empowering that self-directed learning. And I'm sure you're going to hear more from the panel members on that. And next slide, please. All right, and a little bit about credentials, which is a really big component of what's going to come beyond core certification in the various functional areas. And for those of you not familiar, the credential program is jointly sponsored by Undersecretary for A&S and Undersecretary for R&E through DAU. And credentials are basically conveniently packaged up course content, learning resources that provide a pathway for workforce members to get into a specific specialty area and learn about that specialty area or a specific knowledge area. And you see the examples listed here on the left that are available today as credentials. You know, a big one is Agile for the DoD team member, where folks who register that credential will go through a series of courses, have an assessment at the end, either a capstone exercise or some kind of test, and then they'll get something in their resume that says they've had this training. And the important thing to understand about credentials is they're designed to drive that lifelong learning culture. Credentials will expire, so folks will have to come back and refresh on them. And so it's about, you know, providing a mechanism, an important mechanism to support that lifelong learning culture, that learning that's more relevant to the job. You know, the big power in this is that you can look at all the different content areas available, knowledge areas available, and match them to what you're trying to accomplish at work. Okay, and today we have about 30 credentials available so far. Lots of work going on though. We have about 70 to 75 in development across all the functional areas. This is going to be a big part, or is expected to be a big part of how DAU supports this new DIWEA modernization framework. And I think with that, Mike, hopefully that sets some things up for discussion, but back over to you and the panel section.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you joining. I know you weren't originally on the team, but I thought, hey, this is going to really level set the entire audience out there and provide a stepping stone for each of the DACMs and the DADM to step off. And I know next we have Mr. Rob Richardson getting ready to speak to us. So Rob, I think you can probably see my camera, and this is what I'm going to tell you right here. This is an Army symbol, right? So we're gonna have to pick up the pace, and so I'm gonna have to cut you from 10 minutes probably to 9 minutes and 15 seconds. So over to you, Rob.
Roger. Hey, thanks, Mike, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Delighted to have this opportunity to kind of talk about where we are on Army acquisition workforce initiatives. So, you know, we already had some intro talking about this new environment, right? And I don't know, almost 30 years now, I think we haven't had to really worry about peer or near peer competitors, but now that environment has changed. So now, in order to compete with those competitors, we have to innovate and accelerate more than we have at any other time, you know, that I can remember, at least in recent memory. The Army Modernization Enterprise, you know, I guess it's about 3 years ago now, received a task in the Army Modernization strategy to achieve 10x overmatch by 2028. That's a pretty tall order. So clearly we can't afford to spend decades or even years to bring new capabilities online. You know, what good is a weapon system that's out of date when it's fielded or has been defeated? So, you know, at the end of the day, the job for Army acquisition is to ensure that no American soldier is ever in a fair fight anywhere. They can see better with greater situational awareness, better protection, you know, all those things that we do across all of our formation for the acquisition delivery, right? So from the workforce side, you know, the key to optimizing that for us really is a well-trained, agile, adaptive, innovative acquisition workforce, which, you know, is a lot of nice words, and we'll talk about how we think we're going to achieve that, you know, kind of along 3 lines of effort. But all of the current efforts within the Army are laser focused on training our acquisition professionals in those skills that they need to innovate and accelerate delivery capability to the force. Next slide, please. Or we're there already. Never mind. In order to do that, and if you refer to we have a new Army acquisition executive and his testimony, he kind of talked about what the vision for Army acquisition workforce is, and committed again to the development of that agile, adaptive, innovative acquisition workforce with the acquisition acumen and the critical thinking skills to really accelerate delivery of capability to the force. So we're going to do that through really 3 lines of effort. We're aggressively implementing back to basics, and we'll talk about that briefly, where we are and where we stand. For those of you outside the Army, actually some within the Army probably aren't familiar with the Acquisition Leadership Assessment Program, but that's a new initiative tied into the greater Army talent management workforce for command assessment program to really assess the leaders that are going into our most critical jobs to make sure that we're truly putting the right person in the right job. And then we're going to leverage the education and leadership development opportunities that we have for recruiting, retention, and for further leader development. Again, preparing these folks. At the end of my pipeline are those product and project managers that are the ones that are actually putting kit in the hands of soldiers. Next slide, please. So for back to basics, Chris, I think, kind of touched on it, but when we in the Army think about back to basics, 4 words come to mind, right? Empowered. So we're in this new workforce, or in this new redesign, we're empowering the supervisors and the employees to chart that career path. How cool is that you get to work with your supervisors, you build your individual development plan on what you need to do, how you're going to do it, what courses you're going to go to, and the employee truly has input to that process. Lean, we eliminated, or DAU eliminated a lot of those of that scrap learning that was in the litany of courses that you had to take for your certifications before, and tailored to the job that you're in, tailored to getting you just what you need at the time that you need it, to do the job and really gain more from the experiential component than from sitting in a classroom. And then targeted, right time in the career, again, but empowered, lean, tailored, targeted. So good news and bad news. So with the implementation of back to basics for the Army, we had about 11,000 folks that are no longer in the acquisition workforce. So the majority of those were facility engineers that fell out. We also had several thousand in the life cycle logistics, formerly in the life cycle logistics field, but they weren't doing program like life cycle logistics at that level. So as we migrated in the Army, for the life cycle logistics and for the business financial management, if you weren't doing those functions in a program executive office, in a program office, supporting delivery capability, you were coded out. So that took us, down to about the 30,000 that you see there. Next slide, please. Just a quick before and after. So we were about 43,000 before, and now we're down to about 33,000 today, and that's the workforce, kind of across the what were career fields, now the functional areas. Next slide. And this is how they shape out from a command perspective. So the folks that are on the panel know that I'm relatively new to this position. I took over last August, but it was kind of an epiphany to me when I got here that the vast majority of the Army acquisition workforce are not in the what you typically think of as the acquisition workforce in terms of that PEO product delivery workforce. So even after the transition to back to basics, you see the majority there are in the Army Futures Command and the Army Material Command. AMC, of course, is all of the life cycle logistics commands that support the products once they're fielded, as well as all of the contracting workforce, or the predominance of the contracting workforce. And then Army Futures Command, which now includes all of those laboratories and R&D centers, are RDT and e-centers. And then about 15% in the PEOs, and the remaining kind of 15%-ish spread out amongst the other organizations. So we've completed the transition of the personnel, all the certifications, all of the current workforce employees that are still in the workforce are under the Back to Basics certifications. We're in the process of changing the PDs, bringing all of the military in. We're going through for the Army our MAPL reviews now and recoding all those positions. So essentially by, I don't know, September probably, we will consider ourselves FOC for Back to Basics transition in the Army. Next slide, please. So the Acquisition Leader Assessment Program is relatively new. The Army started this for those central select leaders for battalion, brigade commands, et cetera. I guess 3 years ago. 2 years ago, we did a pilot with the 06 for the acquisition commands, and then this past year was the first full implementation. So everyone who put in for a CSL program manager, contracting commander position got the opportunity to go through this in-depth 5-day intense psychometric assessment that took kind of the initial best qualified candidates out of the CSL board and gave us an order of merit list based on how they respond, how they a lot of behavioral interviews, oral and written skills, all those things that went into a psychometric assessment to help folks identify if they had weaknesses, if they need some new tools for their tool bag, if they're self-aware, if they had any counterproductive leadership tendencies or had difficulty making decisions, all those types of things. Really gets to getting folks that are ready, that are self-aware, that possess all those interpersonal and kind of psychological skills to really be successful in the program and get the best out of their workforce. So this is a new tool for the Army that we're going to lean heavily on going forward. We're in the process of getting ready for the next ALIPE cycle this summer that will be for the FY24 CSL pool. And then the last thing, next slide, please, and we'll kind of roll through this, is leveraging all these other initiatives that we've always had, but kind of in a new way. And again, following the Back to Basics mantra, more tailored and targeted to the right points and the employee's career or the leader's career to best develop them, both on the military and on the civilian side. So from a recruiting and retention perspective, we have student loan repayment, and we have acquisition tuition assistance that gets folks in for the leader development. There's something for everybody. So for our junior civilians, we have the DSELT program that kind of takes those GS 11-ish. So folks that are starting to show some talent and some ability, going forward to start to develop then, moving up through lead and ideal, and then of course, the senior enterprise talent management, senior service college, naval postgraduate school, all those things. And then in the current environment, leaning heavily now, or more heavily now, on our training with industry on the military side and our public-private talent exchange program on the civilian side, to be able to embed these acquisition leaders with industry partners to really learn best business processes and begin to make those connections that are going to make them more successful when they move on to those most challenging positions in the acquisition workforce, which are our central selected, project product management positions. So with that's kind of where we are, 3 focus areas, where we are with Back to Basics. And I think I met the objective, Mike, of getting down by a couple minutes. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, hey, great job, Rob. I think it was fantastic. Thanks for laying that out. I think, inquiring minds want to know. for sure. And you did a great job there. And it's also good to see you. We're going to bounce over to the Air Force and we have Mr. Slade here. Sammy, always good to see you. I know your role is slightly different from the other DACMs roles. And so everyone has a slightly different, I guess, roles and responsibilities. Some are much broader, some are very deep. And your role is also different, but you also are responsible for, the critical acquisition workforce. So Sammy, good to see you, and over to you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And as you said, we do things differently in the Air Force, and I'm going to stay on this opening slide for just a second, because if you notice down on the bottom, I was the Air Force DACM for about 8 years, and for the last 2 years, I am now the Department of the Air Force DACM. What does that mean? Well, the Air Force, being the youngster on the block at 75 years old, well, now we have the Space Force, which is now 2 years old. The key with that is we also have 2 service acquisition executives. Mr. Hunter, who was the keynote speaker yesterday, has been on board for about 3 weeks within the Air Force as the air arm of our service acquisition executive. And then for about 5 days now, we've had Mr. Cavelli, who is the space acquisition SAE. So in this role of taking care of the workforce, I serve 2 masters. So I have 2 SAEs who have oversight of their specific pieces of the workforce. And it's very interesting working, because as the Space Force stands up with a new culture, new approach of doing talent management, trying to work to ensure that we keep the focus on the foundational excellence of the acquisition mission. So, and how does that play out? Well, the Air Force, with its 40,000 members of the AC workforce, and the Space Force with about 4, and we are including not just the Space Force uniform wearing members, but also the civilians that work in Space Force organizations. So we are working that for the department to make sure that all the things Rob said about taking care of the AC workforce, we do all those same things for the Department of the Air Force, serving both the Air Force and the Space Force. All right, next slide. All right. So this is all some of the motherhood and apple pie, and I'll tell you, Rob really hit on it, and what the driving forces are, facing our country and facing the mission we have. And that's where this is really a unique opportunity to be a member of the AC workforce. Being a member of the acquisition workforce is more than just coming to work and doing a job. We have a very important mission to serve our country and serve the nation. And as we see things play out around the globe, we understand the value of that amongst all the services in the 4th estate. And I think the other key piece of this is understanding, and I think Chris did a great job talking about the different roles we have now in acquisition, but also the role of the members of the AC workforce. And I think on his slide, he talked about empowering the workforce. I mean, that is truly what we are focused on in the Department of the Air Force, is ensuring that we are transitioning from a workforce that is told what to do, go to these X number of classes and you'll be certified, but going out and empowering the workforce to embrace that lifelong learning. Because there are so many pieces to that, but that, is how our workforce members are going to maintain the edge. With this fast-paced world we're in, you can use all the buzzwords of innovative, agile. We have to be able to react, and we know that the formal training structure that we have is not as responsive, but there are other avenues and other approaches to do that. So yes, we are still leveraging the formal training structures, whether it's at DAU. For us in the Department of the Air Force, we lean heavily on the Air Force Institute of Technology. They play a large role in our training mission for the acquisition workforce. But we now have embraced a lot of digital training. We have an operation called Digital University. And yes, we are just basically contracting out to different content providers to help us deliver those sorts of capabilities, whether it's in artificial intelligence, digital, DevSecOps. I can throw all those terms out, but we have a very large effort going to make sure all of our airmen and all of our guardians are trained. And that's how we see ensuring that the workforce of the future has the competencies and the skills to work within that agile acquisition for workforce. So the real key is for you out there as workforce members, how do you do this? In the past, we had this roadmap. And as you saw on the slides earlier that Rob put up, or that Chris put up, we cut the training, by a lot in a lot of areas. So how do you maintain that edge? Next slide. As workforce members, you're going to get that basic foundational training. But you now have to own your own personal development. And I think that is a key piece of what we are trying to impress in the Department of the Air Force and across the DoD. Individuals must embrace and drive their own training. How do I develop myself as an individual to make sure I have the knowledge, the skills, and the competencies to execute in my particular job? And that is a piece of the back to basics that I embraced totally, is that a lot of this training and development is going to be based on two things. One, the job you currently have, where you're working, and being able to support the mission you currently have. But I think the second and most important part of this
Hey, Sammy, I think you locked up on us. Michelle, is that
year-old
you?
workforce member, and you are going to stay in that role. Hopefully, it says I'm unstable, so hopefully you can still hear me. But I see this as allowing the individuals to steer their development to areas that interest them, that will help them get jobs in areas that interest them, and that our workforce will be more engaged by being interested in the work they're doing. And so I would just say that as workforce members, embracing the lifelong learning means lots of reading, lots of seeking out opportunities. But, Rob had a slide with 1,000 different opportunities the Army has. The Air Force has just as many, as does the Navy and the Fourth Estate. But there are things outside of what we offer, but it's now up to the workforce members to stay current and work that. And I'll just throw out one last challenge with that, is our supervisors are going to now play more of a key role than they ever did, because as you are working as a workforce member, developing your own personal development plan that ties in your career goals, where you'd like to take your career, what's important for your current mission. Supervisors who are not used to playing a role, they would just say, whatever DAU says, go do that. Supervisors are going to have to now become more engaged with their workforce members, which I think is all a positive. So we've got a lot going on in the Air Force. I didn't hit on any of the specific programs, but I'll tell you, with the back to basics, we are very focused on ensuring that the transition goes well, but really we are working very hard on the credentials. And I know DAU is offering a lot of credentials, but we in the Air Force are also developing Department of the Air Force specific credentials. As you can guess, we're going to have space specific credentials. We'll have digital specific credentials that meet our mission needs. And I think that's a great part of this process. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it back over to you and look forward to the questions at the end. Over.
Yeah, outstanding. Thank you, Sammy. You really kind of laid out where the Air Force is going. We're similar, but where it's different. So that's awesome. And you heard them loud and clear to the audience, right? You own your path ahead. Make sure you know who you're talking to, who your career managers are. Make sure that your leaders are aware and understand what their responsibilities are and what yours are, and start bonding with them and your career managers. So thanks again, Sammy. Miss Lyons, great to see you out there. Thanks so much for joining us, and it's over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, and just to emphasize, as you pointed out, the services are a little different in terms of the DACMs role, and we're also a little different in terms of where we are in the implementation of Back to Basics. So I wasn't going to get into the details in terms of a schedule and that sort of thing, in terms of how many, where we are from a position coding change perspective, because the Navy has a challenge because of the size and the complexity of the implementations for Back to Basics, and we're also taking the opportunity to in terms of what the Army is doing, is really doing a bottoms-up review of the positions, both military and civilian, to ensure that the jobs that are coded acquisition, it's really aligned and supports the need to be DOIA certified DAU, as you point out, provides a lot of opportunities for training outside of the core certification. But the question is, do these positions meet what the Navy is laying out as identifying as core acquisition beyond that, more than 50%. So for us, we converted our certifications in our business systems, which is called DACM, in February. And now we're in the midst of working through the organizations to request coding changes. And that's going to be a change to align from the legacy career fields that were eliminated, aligned under the new framework, and then also positions that may end up being we say decoded as acquisition. Still doing great, awesome things for DoD, just not required to be certified under the context of DWIA. So we're working through that right now. We're hoping to get those coding changes in the summer. But for the Navy, the bumper sticker is very much a work in progress. So that makes it a challenge in terms of the communication. We would like to move forward and say, okay, now your position's changed. Here's the next step for you. So we have kind of this, when we're talking about from an incremental fashion, our challenge is we were just able to start communicating more directly with the workforce basically January of this year. And as we've talked, this is significant change to the DWIA construct for the good, but we have to kind of work through that from a communication standpoint. And then reaching out to a very, I would say, decentralized kind of HR community that we have within the Navy. The other thing that I didn't put in my slides, but as I was listening to to the Army and the Air Force, is to emphasize one of the good things that has come up from the Back to Basics is I really see a great collaboration that has been happening between the DACMs as we work through this over the last 2 years. A lot of sharing of best practices and a lot of great collaboration as we implemented this. Although we are different in some ways, we've really been able to take advantage of the knowledge and lessons learned that each of us is embarking on. So that's really been a great thing from my perspective. Okay, so the next slide, please. So again, these are just some highlights from a strategic level, some initiatives for the Navy. We align over on the right is the Acquisition Workforce Strategic Plan that was signed out in 2019. And those objectives that support a workforce to compete and win the fight of the future. So just a couple of examples. We already talked about Back to Basics. I also have a Navy Acquisition Development Program for interns targeting the college, graduating interns, targeting that refresh of the acquisition workforce and targeting the skill set that we need to support the future fight. We are using EDACM. We're trying to create a talent management kind of search capability within EDACM for our acquisition workforce. The other thing that I'll touch on when I have the opportunity to answer some of the questions that follow is the importance of understanding industry. Industry exchanges for SciTap, that's in the cyber IT world, PPTE, where we're supporting a program that OSD leads. Doing rotations in the RDA office is really important for us to enable that knowledge sharing, going out to industry, coming back into the government to inform the particular acquisition programs that those folks are working on. I think is really critical. And then the third item, in terms of energizing the current workforce, we collaborate with some of our public universities to create understanding industry courses for the government, for our employees to understand from an industry perspective what's important for that particular company, whether it's important for cash flow, profit, operating margin. That's a week-long course that we use to enable that understanding to make more effective negotiations and incentivizing the companies as we execute our programs. And then the other thing that that I will also emphasize is at the bottom there on strengthen program leadership, is we talk about credentials, and this is really one of our challenges, to move away from the kind of you must follow this level 1, 2, 3, you need to be certified, to the sort of a back to basics core certification requirement, but overlaying that credentials, specialty learning, industry rotations that are not going to be mandated or required, but are going to need to be informed by the needs of the job. We're trying to leverage our acquisition career council. Each functional area has an SES lead that is going to develop, and some have developed career guides to overlay that DWIA certification to say, okay, here's these credentials that are important, whether it's DAU or service specific credentials and other things to follow that timeline from junior, mid to senior career development, and to start to map that out. And that's all I have from the Navy's perspective. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Marianne. What an incredibly large workforce, and trying to keep your arms around this and moving in the right direction is incredible. And I watch how you do that. So thanks for joining us and sharing. Next, we're going to go to the Fourth Estate, Mr. Otis Lincoln. And I kind of liken this to think of as in a PM or a PEO shop, think of a basket PM where you have 30 ACAT 1D programs. That's kind of what Otis is dealing with. And it's absolutely phenomenal to watch him do that. So Otis, over to you.
Good morning. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be able to speak today, and I'm looking forward to all the dialogue and discussion. Just like my colleagues all stated, while we do a lot of things the same, the Fourth Estate definitely is completely different. As you can see on the actual cover slide, my job is to serve as more of a principal advisor to the component acquisition executive CAEs for 32 different agencies and field activities. So that's essentially every DoD agency that falls outside of the military services components, to include the intelligence community. I work with those agencies to help develop, strengthen their individual workforce. So each agency has their own priorities. Each agency has their own skill set they want to adapt and want to change. So my job is to exercise as much flexibility as I can and help them achieve those goals. One thing, and also too, I think is really unique with the Fourth Estate is the ability to be able to act as that guiding counsel. So, for example, with working as a Fourth Estate with one agency, I'm able to also help build relationships. So if one agency is struggling in an area, I can actually give them that opportunity to say, hey, let's reach out to this agency that was having those same kind of concerns. And now I'm kind of starting to create those bridges and those partnerships that can help move their individual and respective workforces forward to their common goal. Next slide, please. So as you can see, again, like I previously stated, that our primary job is to serve as the advisor to the CAEs. As you know, as Marianne even alluded to, we have a lot of initiatives that we do offer as well for our Fourth Estate DACM agencies. One of them, we have a very big, robust leadership and talent management portfolio. One of the things with this actual framework is where it allows and provides training on a technical, functional, and a soft skill aspect. So in this regard, it kind of helps shape and mold workforce members from all levels, to your entry level, your mid-level, and your actual senior level. And one of the things that actually has worked well in this actual portfolio is our Acquisition Leadership Challenge Program, which is also known as ALCP. And actually, we serve as the PM for this actual training program, and we actually partner with the Army and Air Force, excuse me, on that initiative. And it's been serving well for the past few years. We look at the requirements every year, and we kind of tailor the training to the current need. As you all know, with all the changes from back to basics, everything that was done in the past can definitely take a shift and turn. And we just remain agile and say, okay, well, what training is more important? What is appropriate? How can we help tee up to make our our workforce able to help the warfighter and meet their agency mission. And then we apply that and then provide that training. One of the other initiatives we offer is, newsletters. We definitely stay active on our social media platforms. We do summits, we do site visits. We are definitely highly engaged in our workforce to be able to make sure we keep a finger on the pulse of what is truly needed and how we can help serve and groom and grow our acquisition workforce. One thing we definitely work on a lot is that public-private talent exchange. We work well with HCI to work on that, as well as our student intern program. The reason why these things are so critical is because it does help us maintain a steady pipeline for all the talent that's coming into DoD. As you know, there can be churn across the board and things of that nature. But what we want to make sure is that we are providing all of our workforce those tools and resources that they need to be successful and to create a long-standing career. So also, I just wanted to kind of mention in regards to some of the workforce updates. As of right now, the Fourth Estate does stand at a 99% certification compliant rate. So kudos to all of the agencies out there that has definitely been driving home from the legacy certification standpoint, as well as from the back to basics standpoint. So that's a great job. And I just want to foot stomp that is very appreciative across the board. Just like my colleagues also mentioned, changing the mindset of back to basics, where it's about go to DAU, get your certification. Now it is about building that collaborative effort with your supervisors, with your training managers and the respective agencies, and say, okay, hey, what do I need now? What will I need a year from now? How can I be successful? And that's one of the things that we are definitely looking at, and we partner with our agencies to make sure we continue the buzzword, as Sammy said, that lifelong learning bit. So those are a lot of the things that we want to work on and we continue to strive for. In regards to back to basics, my office has actually already converted all of the certifications in our system of record, which is called DACMs, the Defense Acquisition Talent Management System. So while the certifications do show, and as well as we've kept the legacy certifications in there as well for individuals who may come back into the workforce at a later point in time, where the Fourth Estate is a little unique is the coding and personnel position data is really honed on with those agencies. So as we work with the agencies for them to go ahead and get those positions coded, get positions updated and PDs updated in the system, that information is going to play a critical part on how my office is going to adapt and how we're going to be able to offer training and development for the workforce of the future. I'm not completely concerned, because right now, from what I'm looking at, our largest footprint is the contracting workforce, the logistics workforce, the auditing workforce, and PQM. So with PQM, that no longer is a career field. It's actually been absorbed into ETM, the engineering and technical management functional area. So there's going to be some shifting of workforce and priorities at that level. But overall, I think with our bench strength, that I can see the workforce, we should be kind of maintaining a steady plate. As of right now, I also just wanted to mention that we are constantly looking at ways that we can be innovative, how we can offer an opportunity to be able to be a sounding board. We do a lot of collaboration meetings together to say, hey, what can we do to best service? I look at my office as a service organization. My job is to ensure that we provide everything, those tools and those resources that you need to be successful. So with that, Mike, that's all I have. Just wanted to kind of give a high level view. And again, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, hey, Otis, this is great. I mean, the Fourth Estate often is not understood, and I think you did a great job of really laying that out for how broad and that is, right, and how deep it is. And of course, under your technical expertise, but also your leadership and getting after those certifications. I will say a little bit on the funny side, if you will, 99% certification compliance really raises the bar for the other services to get going. So thanks for laying the gauntlet out there. So this is awesome. Thanks. Good rundown. Appreciate that, Otis. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Okay, so I think we're going to roll right into the questions and answers. I had a couple comments I wanted to add here, but I think we'll go right into the first question, and so everyone can see it. So if you miss anything that I say, you get a chance to see it. So I'm going to select services. So services, Fourth Estate, be on the ready here. So from your services perspective, which learning and training opportunities have had the most impact in achieving acquisition results for warfighters? So let's go to the Army first. So Rob, over to you to answer this question.
Right. Am I back?
Yep,
Okay.
Roger.
So, so this is an interesting, my from the hip answer is all of them, but, and I'm somewhat facetious with that. From a baseline standpoint, clearly, DAU's standardization of the functional training has been incredibly beneficial to ensure, that we have the right training and kind of the right foundational level to set people up for success to start with, right? Especially, as we assess, well, as civilians or military first coming into acquisition, trying to learn how to spell acquisition and figure out all the things that it consists of. So that kind of initial couple of touch points with that really foundational training really sets the stage for success for the rest of the career. Looking ahead with back to basics, the more targeted training and frankly, I still go back, and kind of the old DAU 1.0, everybody got wrapped up about the certification and kind of lost sight of the experiential piece, right? I mean, humans are learning individuals, so you learn from making mistakes, you learn from what the people around you do. So I think with back to basics, again, fleshing out the foundation and kind of the topical areas while still emphasizing the experiential piece, on the job, learning from seasoned acquisition professionals, getting that mentoring, kind of learning what right looks like and react and when not to react. A lot of those soft skills, right, that you don't get in kind of the institutional training base. And then for us, I think, as you get to the more senior level, certainly most recently, I alluded to in the discussion, but some of those developmental programs, but particularly as we look at some of the more challenging 06, project management positions we've implemented what we're calling enhanced command preparation. I think this was after your time, or maybe was kind of coming around as you went out the door to warp speed, but looking out and what additional kind of skills and training should this individual have before they step into that job. So if you're going to take the satellite program, spending time with Raytheon or whomever, not violating ethics or whatever, but time in the building, working with the G8, that's often overlooked. So when you look at the training programs we have, like LEAD, where starting kind of at the 13 level, getting some building time with working as a DA system coordinator, working in the G8, working in these, understanding how decisions are made, and then getting that industry exposure, we think is paramount. The other things are all still important. Senior service college, new requirement for Army now, if you're going into an 06 project office, to have MEL 1. So if folks haven't been, once they're selected and slated, we airdrop them into our senior service college fellowship program to get that. But it all builds, right? And it all comes back to, kind of to the point I think we are with back to basics of having a good understanding, of where you are, and that as an individual, you're as much or more responsible for managing your career and your training than your supervisors or your agency are. So, but yeah, that initial touch point with the DAU, kind of institutional training is really critical to getting people off on the right foot.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Rob. I think it's wise counsel, right? I mean, it's a balance between, It's kind of like as you're moving through your career, you're going to have some operational time, you're going to have some staff time, and then you're going to do some learning time. And so making sure that you're getting into those right positions at the right time is going to be critically important. So we appreciate that input. Let's bounce out now. How about Mary Ann, from the Navy's perspective? Which training opportunities do you think have had the most impact on achieving acquisition results for the warfighters?
So, our view is it's really critical in achieving acquisition and results. Encouraging employees to work with their supervisors to inform the needs of the job is going to be key for this back to basics implementation. I also mentioned the the insight into industry courses that we've offered for our program management, contracts personnel to to understand what is important or valued on the industry side. And also things like when we talk about experiential learning opportunities, we really make it emphasize the importance of getting our workforce out to the field, to get hands-on in terms of the products that they're supporting, whether they're financial, engineers, contracts type. It's really important to get out to the field and meet the fleet or kick the tires. So we really encourage, and that is incorporated into our organizations. And then, in terms of the NADP program and the development program that we have for college graduates, it's a 2-year program that's managed by our Naval Acquisition Career Center. That's really important to train these, these new employees that are going to hopefully stay in the Navy and move along and contribute and bring those new ideas and motivators into our programs to help us think differently and leverage innovation. So those some of the key things that I think are important. Over.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. I think the Navy's doing a fantastic job of that. So when I watch how the Navy is pursuing it, whether it's surface or submarines or in the offices in the Pentagon, is doing a fantastic job of training. So thank you so much. Okay, so I'm gonna move to our second question here. And so the question that I want to ask is leveraging, and most of you know this, the adaptive acquisition framework in its 6 pathways. How does your service plan to train and resource your workforce to ensure they have the right skills for success? So let's go out to the Air Force. Sammy, what are your thoughts here?
All right, thanks, sir. We are already doing this. It was before the Agile or adaptive framework. We look at how, and I think this ties in so well with back to basics, because this now allows us to really focus our training on those 4 different missions, those different frameworks for how we tailor the acquisition approaches, right? I'm going to go back to a story from when I first started in this position. One of our PEOs, who was in a software-centric PEO, and he said, "Sammy, I got this job. I had no idea how to manage software. I spent my whole time working major airplane type systems, and now I'm in charge of software and I have no idea what I'm doing because it's so different," right? So to me, that just points out why this is so important. I will tell you that we really leverage the Defense Acquisition Workforce Development account to do a lot of the things I'm going to talk about. And I said earlier, we do leverage the Air Force Institute of Technology. And I'll use services acquisition. We have a services PEO, one of the only services that has a service acquisition PEO, but we have built service acquisition specific courses at the Air Force Institute of Technology. So we work with the PEO, with the functional owners to develop those courses. And as we build those, we are going to leverage this in the the back to basics framework and put credentials out there so that we know what talent has those skills, has that background, has that knowledge to be effective in services. And like I said earlier about individuals being able to steer their careers, well, hopefully as we move along that path, we'll have people that liked services acquisition and spend a lot of time doing that self-development in that area. The second example I have is with software. The Air Force We went out the gate early on. We've got all the software factories with Gucci names like, Kessel Run, Kobayashi Maru, Ski Camp, and I think I've been to about 50% of them, and they are unique organizations. We have a lot of people that are sitting down coding, I go back to my stack of cards in college doing Fortran or whatever it was, right? But we have built digital university. Yes, it's not an acquisition specific operation, but with our defense acquisition workforce development account funding, we're funding about 50% of that, but that's able to train our workforce and outside of that. So we are really focused on finding opportunities to train our workforce moving forward. And I'll just throw out a plug because it was great that Congress gave the department $50 million for artificial intelligence training. We've garnered a large chunk of that, and we are stepping out with a prioritized list of artificial intelligence type of training. As we have a artificial intelligence accelerator up at MIT. We have 11 folks working up there that have already put together senior level courses for artificial intelligence, and now we're going to spread it out to the service. But those are the sorts of things we're going to be able to do, and they line up so well with the adapted acquisition framework. Over.
Yeah, great rundown, Sammy. I think the Air Force is certainly, leaning forward and aggressively getting after this. So thanks, and I think it's great to see. All right, so I'm going to move to question number 3. I think this one, I'll go to the fourth estate on question number 3. Let's see. So Otis, so how will you, the fourth estate, as a service career manager, track and manage credentials given they're not required yet highly encouraged? How are you going to do that? That's inquiring minds want to know.
All right. So in regards to credentialing, so the fourth estate actually has our system DACMs, as I previously stated. So DACMs actually houses, it's our repository, just like every other service have their own repository. It holds all your training, it holds your certifications, it tracks your COPs, continuous learning points that you've accumulated. So the same is going to be referenced with credentials. We've already had our systems updated. We worked with our industry partners, had DACMs updated to reflect any type of credentials that an individual has earned, whether it's the completed training, the credential itself, to also include the expiration date. And all of that data can actually be found when an individual logs into DACMs and look at their career brief, and it will lay all of that out for them.
Wow. Well, it sounds to me like you're setting the standard for the other services there, Otis. You might want to share some best practices. No pressure to the other services. Thank you so much. Hey, let me bounce out to, if I could, administratively to Michelle Johnson, Miss Johnson. So do we have about 4 or 5 minutes left? Is that correct?
That's right, 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. So I think I'm going to go with maybe one more question here. Let's go to a question number. Let's go to question number 4. And so this question reads, how does your service prepare acquisition leaders to communicate early and often with their industry and coalition counterparts? Hint, look what's going on around the world right now. Industry and coalition partners have to be, side by side with us to ensure we design for exportability and ensure allied and partner nation interoperability for the future battlefield. So let's go to the Army on that one. Rob, what are your thoughts?
All right, am I off? Pushed the button too many times. I think I'm on. All right, so to some degree, this is as much a discussion for the requirements community as it is for us, which in our case would be the Army Futures Command. But this is a huge problem, right? We just had this discussion at the DASA PEO summit here last week, and with respect to the Ukrainian operation. So, there's a lot of requirements here. I think, to sum it up, we probably just at the deck plates, to steal some of Mary Ann's words there. We probably need basic literacy in this, right? I mean, PMs today have more rocks in their rucksack than any time in history. I think every time you turn around, Congress or somebody is laying another requirement. So, but this one's important, and you can't just give it lip service. So we have to find a way to create, I think, at least basic literacy in this. So the PMs and the APMs, system engineers, all those folks, that this is in the back of their mind, when they're building their acquisition strategy, when they're having that preliminary design review, having those discussions with the contractor, so that at least, we have some hope of having exportability at the point that we get to bending metal. And, in the Army, I think we have some PEO, all of the PEOs have defense cooperation folks embedded in the PEO, and of course at ASALT, we have that capability. But I think several of the PEOs that live this, right? PEO aviation, PEO ground combat systems come to mind, that this has always been, kind of first and foremost in their mind, because those are the big things that you see. We got to get that level of literacy and kind of the functional use pushed out to the PEO soldiers of the world and the C3Ts of the world that may not have really designed around that, or were more focused on, in some cases, not. We can't share this capability with anybody because it's our secret sauce. So how do we get kind of functional literacy and kind of cross fertilize those ideas, across, so whether it becomes a credential in the future or some sort of functional training that folks can drop into, how do we get kind of that baseline literacy across the force, so that it's at least considered in all of the decision making, where it may not be today.
Yeah, great points, Rob. And I would challenge everybody out there, not just the DACMs and the DATM in the academic environment, right? But every one of us has a responsibility to figure this out. So this is a question that's going to be asked many times over. I was on a panel with two Department of State SESs this week, and these are the kinds of discussions that we're having. So just challenge yourself to that. I know we're at the end of the time. I wish I could go actually another hour, had many more questions. But what I'm going to do at this time is just kind of reflect just briefly here in the last probably 30 seconds. We covered a lot of topics as acquisition professionals, scholars alike, right? We've got to ponder a couple points that came up today as we bring us to a close. First, you saw from the panel members there, make no mistake, the Department of Defense is committed to ensuring the workforce is prepared for the future. I think that is a given. Second, the DACMs and the DATM are relentlessly supporting the service acquisition training needs slightly differently while developing talent for the future. So make sure you know what your DACMs and DATM are doing and stay close to them and support them. And third, knowing how each service is approaching talent management allows you and us collectively, right, to seek best practices. You heard some best practices out there, and I was kind of poking, having some fun with some of them, but there are best practices out there. And sometimes my idea is not always the best, right? And I just have to understand that somebody probably has a better solution out there. So work together as a collective joint force. Thank you for attending today. Without you, it would just be me and the panel members, and they see me all the time. And sometimes they don't even want to answer the phones anymore. They see me too often, but I appreciate you joining and listening to us. But thanks to the panelists and Mr. Robinson for your counsel as we were preparing for this, the presentations, as we continue this journey together for our acquisition workforce. So have a great morning or afternoon, wherever you are, and thank you for supporting our great nation. So with that said, over to, I think, Dr. Mortlock.
Thank you, folks, and continue to support the rest of the symposium. Have a great day.
Thanks all. Outstanding. See ya.
Kevin, you can end it.